All right, get ready for this one.
Yeah.
Ready to dive deep into some Faroes history.
Always.
But, not the boring textbook stuff.
Right.
We're talking sagas,
Oh, yeah.
blood feuds, power
Yeah.
grabs, even a touch of Viking magic, just to spice things up.
Sounds good.
You've given us a pretty impressive stack of sources for this deep dive.
Yeah.
We've got the Føroyingasøga itself,
The real deal.
which looks to be like the main event, the saga in its full glory.
Absolutely.
It's it's a window into this world that feels both strangely familiar and completely alien at the same time.
Yeah, you've got heroes and villains, betrayals and triumphs, all set against this backdrop of these rugged, windswept islands, perched right between Norway and Iceland.
All right, so to help us navigate this epic tale, we've also got the Faroe saga, blood, power, and conversion, which gives us a nice overview, the key players, the main themes.
The cheat sheet.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, we have this deep dive into the life of Sigmundur Brestesson. He seems to be right at the heart of all the action.
Front and center.
Yeah.
His story is particularly interesting, I think, because he really embodies this clash between the old Viking world and this, rising tide of Christianity coming in.
The changing of the times.
He's got to make these choices that'll shape not only his own fate, but the fate of, the whole Faroe Islands.
So if we choose to accept this mission,
Oh, or accepting it.
I think we are. We need to untangle this web of alliances and betrayals, get to know some of these memorable characters, and see how the Faroe Islands managed to get through this really tumultuous period.
Right.
But before we dive into all the drama,
Yeah.
let's set the scene.
Okay.
So geographically speaking,
Yeah.
what makes these islands so unique?
I want you to imagine, right, these sheer cliffs just rising out of the North Atlantic, fierce storms, just this unforgiving landscape that really demands resilience from anyone who lives there. These islands are isolated, rugged, windswept, really the perfect breeding ground for, these tough, independent Vikings.
So like Game of Thrones, but with sheep.
Well, there are definitely some parallels there. That isolation, it created this culture that was really steeped in, seafaring, self-reliance, and, these really, really strong kinship bonds. But at the same time, it also bred this fierce competition. Competition for resources, for influence.
Which brings us to, I think, the core of the Føroyingasøga, right? The power dynamics at play.
Yeah.
Even before the main story really kicks off, we've got all these different chieftains all vying for control.
Yeah, that's right. The saga doesn't really say exactly how these chieftains came to power, whether it's lineage or election or even just brute force. But one thing is clear, their rivalries are deep-seated. And this simmering tension, only gets worse when a certain King Harald Bluetooth of Denmark shows up on the scene.
Harald Bluetooth, king with the tech-savvy name, right?
Yeah.
What's he doing in all of this?
Well, his appearance in the Faroes, right, at this particular time, it really signals the early influence of the mainland on the islands. He's a symbol of these larger forces at play, these expanding kingdoms like Denmark, like Norway, starting to reach out.
But it seems like he's not the only one making some power moves.
Oh, absolutely not.
The saga mentions this whole incident involving stolen silver.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this where our main antagonist,
Yeah.
Tróndur Ígotu, steps onto the stage?
That's right. So you've got two of the king's men. They get robbed right there at the market, and it throws everyone into chaos. Tróndur, ever the opportunist, sees this as his chance to make a big impression. He steps in, seemingly to restore order, and he convinces the king to impose this, collective fine on everybody who was there.
Clever move. So he's playing the peacemaker, but I got a feeling there's more to it.
Oh, definitely. He promises, to redistribute the money to those who were robbed, and of course to the king. But the Føroyingasøga, it actually quotes him as saying, "Men som kommin higar, legur som mycket silver from, sum kongur krevur. Kongur skal självar havata,
Which basically translates to,
everyone here should contribute the amount the king demands. And, the king gets to keep whatever is left over.
oh,
So in other words, Tróndur's skimming a nice profit off the top while appearing to be this loyal subject.
that's one way to play the game.
Talk about a power play, right?
Yeah.
He's manipulating this whole situation to benefit himself, enriching himself, gaining favor with the king at the same time.
But something tells me not everyone's buying this act.
You're right. The saga hints at this, pre-existing rivalry. This rivalry between Tróndur and two other powerful chieftains, Bristur and Beinir.
Bristur and Beinir, they ring a bell. They're the ones whose sons Sigmundur and Torr end up playing a major role, right?
Exactly. And this is where the seeds of this huge conflict are sown, Bristir and Beinir, who together ruled like half of the islands. They were popular leaders, especially Bristir. He was, the Viking to beat, as they say. But their success, it just made Trondur more jealous, more ambitious.
So you have this, like, classic power struggle brewing. Ambitious newcomer versus the established leaders.
Right.
I'm guessing this tension doesn't just fizzle out peacefully?
Not at all. The Føroyingasøga describes this brutal ambush, orchestrated by Trondur and his allies. Havgrimr and Bjarni Svinoyar Bjarni, they lure Bristir and Beinir to the island of Demon. And, well, let's just say it doesn't end well for the brothers.
All right, so we have our inciting incident, right? The spark that ignites the powder keg of this whole saga. But before we get into fallout from that,
Okay.
I'm curious about Trondur's allies.
Yeah.
Who are these guys? What's their motivation for getting involved?
That's a great question. And one, the saga kind of leaves unanswered. We know Havgrimr, he's a powerful chieftain in his own right. His son will actually play a significant role later on. And then there's Bjarni, his nickname, Svinoyar Bjarni. It hints at, a certain ruthlessness.
Svinoyar Bjarni. Doesn't sound like someone you want to bump into in a dark alley.
Definitely not. It seems like they both have their own scores to settle. And they see this alliance with Trondur as a way to get ahead, to advance their own ambitions.
So it's not just a simple good versus evil situation.
Wow, not at all.
Everyone's got their own agenda, their own desires.
Absolutely.
Power, revenge, the whole deal.
Yeah, and these motivations, they'll keep shifting and evolving as the saga unfolds, leading to, some unexpected alliances and some shocking betrayals.
Oh, I'm sure.
But for now, the immediate consequence of this ambush is the tragic fate of Bristir and Beinir's sons, Sigmundur and Torrir.
Right, the young boys, who are now orphans thanks to Trondur.
Yeah.
The saga mentions they're sold into slavery. Pretty dark turn of events.
It is. Imagine, being a child, witnessing your father's murders, and then being torn from your home, sold to a complete stranger in a foreign land. It's trauma that'll shape Sigmundur's entire arc, fuel his desire for revenge, and push him to become this formidable warrior he's destined to be.
So we've got our stage set, right?
Yeah.
This land, it's just rife with power struggles.
Yeah.
You've got this cunning, ambitious villain in Trondur.
Right.
And these two young boys, whose lives have been totally upended by tragedy.
Yeah.
Sounds the perfect recipe for a gripping saga.
Oh, absolutely. And this is just the beginning. Føroyingasøga is about to take us on one wild ride. It's full of twists and turns. Just, you wait. Things are about to get epic.
Yeah, you've definitely got me hooked.
Yeah.
But before we move on to part 2, I'm curious to hear what stood out to you so far. Is there a particular character or event that's, piqued your interest?
For me, it's the complexity of Trondur's character. He's clearly the antagonist, but he's not just a one-dimensional villain, He's shrewd, he's ambitious, capable of great cruelty, but he also have this, charisma, this cunning, that makes him a really compelling figure.
I agree. I'm also fascinated by the fact that we don't really know much about his backstory, about his motivations.
Right.
What is it that drives him to these lengths to gain power?
Right.
Is it just pure ambition, or is there something deeper there?
That's something to keep in mind as we go, as we delve further into the saga. But one thing's for sure, Trondur's actions, they're going to have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved, especially for young Sigmundur and Torrir.
Speaking of whom, their journey is just beginning, right?
Oh, yeah.
From slavery to refuge with this mysterious figure over.
Yeah.
Their story's about to take some really unexpected turns.
We'll explore all that and more in part 2.
Yeah.
Till then, keep those questions coming.
We'll be back. Welcome back to our Pharaoh's Saga Deep Dive. When we left off, young Sigmundur and Torrir were facing a pretty grim fate, right?
Yeah.
Sold into slavery by Trondur.
It's hard to imagine what must have been going through their minds. Stripped of their identities, their home, their freedom, it would have been easy to just give up.
Yeah.
But even in the face of all this adversity, a glimmer of hope appears. The Føroyingasøga tells us about this Norwegian merchant, Ravnur.
Oh.
He buys the boys, but there's a twist.
He buys them, but then sets them free.
Exactly.
That's unexpected. Why would he do that?
That's a question that's caused a lot of debate among scholars. The saga itself doesn't explicitly state Ravnur's motivations, but it does give us some clues. It mentions that he learned their lineage, their connection to Bristir and Beinir.
So maybe he was moved by their story?
Perhaps, seeing these two young boys unjustly robbed of their birthright.
So maybe it was a sense of justice, a desire to right a wrong. It's interesting to think that even in this world of Viking raids and power struggles, there's still room for compassion.
It adds another layer to this story for sure.
It does.
This one act of kindness, however, it was motivated. It has huge implications for the entire saga.
Yeah.
It gives Sigmundur and Thorir a chance to reclaim their lives, a chance to fight for what's rightfully theirs.
But they're still a long way from home, hunted by Trondra's allies. Where do they go from here?
This is where the Føroyingasøga takes on this, almost mythical feel. Remember that mysterious character, Olvir?
Oh, yeah.
He lives high up in the Dovreftjall Mountains, this rugged, unforgiving landscape shrouded in mist and legend. It's the perfect hideout for someone who wants to disappear.
And somehow Sigmundur and Thorir end up in his care.
Well, it's not quite that straightforward, but there is an element of fate at play.
Okay.
They wander through the mountains, lost and exhausted, guided only by this faint wisp of smoke rising in the distance.
Okay, I'm picturing it. The rugged peaks of the Dovreftjall, the snow-covered landscape, and these two young boys, weary from their journey, drawn towards this beacon of hope. Sounds like something out of a fairy tale.
There's definitely a sense of destiny at work here. And when they finally reach that source of smoke, they find themselves at the doorstep of Ulver's homestead. He's not exactly the welcoming type. The saga describes him as, imposing, even hostile at first.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect a mountain hermit to be throwing a welcome party.
Mm-hmm.
But something tells me he doesn't turn them away.
You're right. While he's initially wary, he eventually agrees to take them in, partly thanks to the intervention of Thorir, this young woman who lives under his protection.
Interesting. So they found a place of refuge. But what's life like with Ulver? It can't be all cozy fires and heartwarming stories.
You're catching on. The Føroyingasøga paints this very vivid picture of their time in the Dovreftjall Mountains. It's a harsh existence, this constant battle against the elements, a real test of their strength and their resilience.
So less cozy cabin, more Viking boot camp.
Exactly. Ulver pushes them to their limits, teaching them to hunt, to fish, how to navigate that treacherous, mountain terrain. He's not just their protector, he's their mentor, shaping them into the warriors they need to become.
It makes you wonder, was this all part of some grand plan? Was Volver always meant to guide these boys?
That's a fascinating question. One that the saga leaves open to interpretation, really. But there's definitely a sense that their meeting wasn't just coincidence.
Speaking of destiny, this is where Sigmundur's famous bear-slaying adventure comes in, right?
That's right.
The sources make a big deal out of his strength and skill as a warrior.
They do. And this episode really highlights both those things. The Føroyingasøga describes this fierce battle between Sigmundur and this massive bear, a true test of courage and strength, and of course our hero emerges victorious.
Classic Sigmundur. But beyond just being a cool story, what does this tell us about him?
I think it's a really powerful symbol, this symbol of his coming of age, his transformation from a boy into a man, capable of facing any challenge. It also showcases this deep bond he forms with Ulver, who, recognizes his potential and praises his bravery. And speaking of praise, there's a passage in the saga where someone describes Sigmundur by saying, Vartan mavur, I hefur gingi Olavi Tryggvasini nesti el olum itrotum.
Wait, hold on. Who's Oliver Tryggvason, and what does that quote even mean?
Ah, good catch.
Oh.
Oliver Tryggvason is a key figure who'll enter the saga a little bit later. He's the king of Norway and a fierce proponent of Christianity. And that quote basically translates to, he was the man considered second only to King Olaf Tryggvason in all feats of strength and skill.
Wow.
So it's this really powerful testament to Sigmundur's abilities, even at this young age.
So this bear-slaying episode foreshadows his future encounters with the king. I'm sensing the theme here. Destiny, fate, these interconnected lives weaving together.
Exactly. And there's one more twist to this part of the story. The revelation of Ulver's true identity. Remember that whole mystery surrounding him?
Yeah, the whole Forbidden Forest thing definitely piqued my curiosity.
Well, it turns out Ulver has a connection to Sigmundur and Thorir. That goes way beyond being their mentor. He was actually the kidnapped husband of their mother, taken by Vikings years ago.
Whoa, talk about a family reunion. That adds a whole new layer to the story.
It does. This revelation explains his initial reluctance to shelter the boys. He's still wrestling with the trauma of his own abduction. But it also reinforces this theme of fate, how interconnected all their lives are.
So Ulver wasn't just some mountain hermit. He was a key player in this whole saga all along.
It makes their training with him even more significant, right? He wasn't just shaping them into warriors, he was preparing them to avenge their family, to reclaim their stolen legacy.
And with his newfound knowledge, Sigmundur and Thorir are even more determined to return to the Faroe Islands and face their destiny. So after years of training with Hrólfr, they say goodbye to their mentor and set sail for home, ready to confront Tróndur. But I have a feeling their journey is far from over. Tróndur's been in power for years now. He's not going to give up without a fight.
You're absolutely right. And Sigmundur's return marks the beginning of this, bloody power struggle. This clash that will test his skills, his alliances, and ultimately, his very soul.
All right, you've definitely set the stage for an epic showdown. What awaits Sigmundur and Thorir back in the Faroe Islands? Can they overcome Tróndur's grip on power? And what role will this newfound knowledge about Hrólfr play in their destiny?
All those questions and more will be answered in Part 3. Stay tuned as we witness this clash of heroes and villains, the rise and fall of alliances, and the enduring power of fate in shaping the future of the Faroe Islands.
Welcome back to our Pharaoh Saga Deep Dive.
Oh, yeah.
Last time we left Sigmundur and Thorir sailing home, ready for that confrontation with Tróndur.
Ready for a showdown?
Yeah, they've trained for years, they've honed their skills, they've even uncovered some pretty shocking family secrets.
Right.
But returning to the Pharaohs, it's not like they can just step back into their old lives. A lot has changed while they were away.
Oh, absolutely. Time doesn't stand still, especially not in a place as volatile as the Faroe Islands.
Right.
While Sigmundur and Thorir were off battling bears and uncovering family secrets with Hrólfr, Tróndur, he's been busy. Consolidating his power, strengthening those alliances, tightening his grip on the islands. He's not just some chieftain anymore. He's a force to be reckoned with.
So Sigmundur can't just rely on brute strength or the element of surprise, right?
No.
He needs a strategy. He needs a way to navigate all these complex power dynamics.
He does. And this is where his time in Norway really proves crucial. Remember, he didn't just spend those years training in the wilderness. He also forged connections with some very powerful figures, like Håkon, the king of Norway.
Yes, that alliance.
Yeah.
That could be a real game changer.
Absolutely.
Having the backing of the Norwegian king, it gives Sigmundur legitimacy, a level of authority. That goes beyond just being the son of a slain chieftain.
It's like coming home with a royal seal of approval.
Exactly.
And Sigmundur doesn't waste any time putting this new influence to work. The saga of Sigmundur Brestesen details a series of strategic victories that really showcase his growth as a leader. It's not just about revenge anymore, it's about reclaiming his rightful place and establishing a new order.
So less smash and grab revenge mission and more calculated campaign to reshape the political landscape.
Right.
Are there any specific events that stand out?
There's this fascinating encounter with a notorious Viking named Ranfr.
Okay.
He challenges Sigmundur to single combat. Classic Viking way to settle disputes. Right?
Yeah.
But there's more at stake here. Ranfr, he's not just some random brawler. He's a powerful figure in his own right. And this duel becomes a symbolic clash between the old ways and this new order that Sigmundur represents.
So if Sigmundur wins, it's not just a personal victory, it's a statement.
Yeah.
It shows he's a force to be reckoned with.
Right.
Someone who can command respect, inspire loyalty.
Absolutely.
So what happens?
Well, let's just say Sigmundur doesn't disappoint. He defeats Ranfr in this, brutal fight, cementing his reputation as a leader and attracting a following of loyal warriors who are drawn to his strength and his vision.
That sounds like a real turning point.
It is.
Those years of hardship, of training, they've paid off.
They have.
He's gone from a boy sold into slavery to a man capable of leading and inspiring others.
And that momentum continues. There's another encounter, this time with Harald Jarnhys, a powerful chieftain sent by Håkon, initially to eliminate Sigmundur.
Oh, wow.
But instead of a showdown, they end up joining forces.
Talk about an unexpected twist.
Right.
So he's got the backing of the Norwegian king,
Right.
but he's also winning over potential rivals.
Yeah.
Forging these alliances.
He's playing the game of power on a whole new level.
He is.
But remember, we still have Tróndur lurking in the shadows. He hasn't been sitting idly by. The Føroyingasøgan describes this tense back and forth between the two factions. Skirmishes, strategic maneuvers, betrayals, like a game of chess.
With incredibly high stakes.
Yeah.
It makes you realize this isn't just a simple good versus evil story. It's this complex web of alliances, ambitions, grudges.
It is.
Where the lines between hero and villain, well, they can get pretty blurry.
Absolutely. And speaking of blurred lines, there's another layer to this whole conflict. that we haven't really touched on yet.
Oh,
The arrival of Christianity.
Right, Sigmundur's conversion
Yeah.
by King Oliver Tryggvason back in Norway.
Exactly.
He doesn't just return home seeking revenge and power. He also brings this new faith with him,
He does.
this belief system that's completely foreign to the traditional Viking way of life.
And it adds this whole new dimension to the conflict. The Føroyingasøga describes this resistance Sigmundur faces from Trondur and other chieftains who are clinging to their pagan beliefs. They see this new religion as a threat to their traditions, their way of life.
So it's not just a power struggle anymore. It's this clash of ideologies, a battle for the soul of the Faroe Islands.
Exactly.
How does this ideological conflict play out?
It all comes to a head in this dramatic confrontation between Sigmundur and Trondur. Frustrated by the islanders' resistance to Christianity, Sigmundur forces Trondur to convert at sword point.
Whoa, that's a pretty drastic approach.
It is.
It seems like Sigmundur, even with the best of intentions, is starting to adopt the tactics of his enemies,
Yeah.
using force and coercion to get what he wants.
It's a pivotal moment in the saga. He's driven by what he believes is a noble mission to bring peace and enlightenment to the Faroe Islands, but he compromises his ideals in the process.
It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? A hero corrupted by the very forces he's trying to overcome. It makes you wonder, did Sigmundur ultimately become the very thing he was fighting against?
It's a question that kind of haunts the rest of the saga. Because while Trondur outwardly accepts Christianity, he's secretly plotting his revenge. He rallies his allies, including his nephew, Sjur Tillotson, who emerges as a key figure in this final act.
So we have our final showdown brewing.
We do.
But this time the stakes are even higher.
They are.
It's not just about land or power anymore. It's about these clashing beliefs,
Right.
the consequences of choices made, and this, enduring nature of revenge.
Absolutely. The tension builds. The Føroyingasøga describes a series of ambushes, betrayals. Sigmundur, despite his victories, he finds himself increasingly isolated. His alliances are crumbling, his enemies are closing in, and the saga just hurtles toward its tragic conclusion.
All right, I'm on the edge of my seat. Tell me, how did it all end?
Okay, picture this. Sigmundur and his loyal brother, Torrir. They're fleeing from Trondur and his men. They're trapped on this narrow cliff with nowhere left to run. Torrir urges Sigmundur to swim to safety, escape while he still can. But Sigmundur, true to his nature, refuses to abandon his brother. They stand their ground, facing overwhelming odds. And ultimately, they meet a tragic end. They're hunted down and killed. Not by Trondur himself, but by Lever, the son of Havgrímur.
Lever, the son of one of Trondur's allies. That's a shocking betrayal.
It is.
It really highlights how unpredictable these alliances were, how quickly loyalties could shift.
Yeah, and it underscores this idea that revenge, even when it's achieved, often comes at a very steep price.
Right.
Sigmundur, despite all his victories, all his efforts, he ultimately falls victim to the very forces he was trying to control.
So what happens to the pharaohs after Sigmundur's death? Does Trondur finally get what he wants? Total control?
Not quite. The saga describes how he tries to cover up his involvement in Sigmundur's death. But his actions don't go unnoticed. And in a surprising turn of events, it's actually Lever, the man who killed Sigmundur, who ends up shaping the future of the islands.
Wow.
He pledges allegiance to the Norwegian king, Oliver Helgi, effectively bringing the pharaohs under Norwegian rule.
So in a way, Sigmundur's vision, this vision of a Christian Faroe Islands under Norwegian control, it comes to pass. But through this series of unintended consequences,
It does.
this chain of events he could have never foreseen.
Exactly. It's a bittersweet ending, for sure. A reminder that history is rarely a straightforward narrative. It's full of twists and turns, unexpected outcomes, and the enduring influence of choices made, both good and bad.
And it leaves us with this final question. Was Sigmundur a hero, a villain, or something in between?
That's the question, isn't it?
He fought for justice, for his family, for his faith, but he also resorted to violence, to coercion.
He did.
He's a complex figure, a product of his time. His legacy is forever intertwined with this turbulent history.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is that the saga doesn't end neatly.
Right?
With his death, there's this intriguing detail about a gold ring he was wearing when he was killed. The Føroyingasøga mentions it in passing, but it never explains it fully.
Oh.
Where did this ring come from? What meaning did it hold for Sigmundur, and what happened to it after his death?
It sounds like the start of another deep dive.
It does, doesn't it?
Maybe there's a whole other saga waiting to be uncovered, hidden within the details of that mysterious ring.
Perhaps. And that's the beauty of exploring history, isn't it? There's always another layer to uncover, another mystery to unravel, another story waiting to be told. Thanks for joining us on this epic journey through blood feuds, power struggles, and clashing cultures. Until next time, keep those questions coming and keep diving.
And keep an eye out for those mysterious rings. Who knows what secrets they might hold? We'll see you in the next deep dive.